In the 1970s, boat builders scoffed at the slow, squat Westsail 32, nicknaming it the West Snail and condemning it as obsolete in a world obsessed with racing speed. But when the perfect storm smashed the North Atlantic in 1991, throwing 40-foot walls of water at everything afloat, the supposedly indestructible racers splintered while the Westsail crew abandoned ship, convinced their ugly duckling was doomed. Days later, the West Snail surfaced, battered but alive, and inside was proof its designers had understood something everyone else had forgotten. Why did the industry's punchline become the North Atlantic's sole survivor? The answer turns every idea about seaworthiness and safety on its head. In 1973, the boatyards of America were humming. Fiberglass was the new miracle, and the industry was churning out hulls by the thousands. Every glossy magazine cover promised the same thing: speed. The new dream was not just to sail, but to fly. Designers chased the next big breakthrough: fin keels, spade rudders, and hulls so light you could lift them with one hand. Ads shouted about performance and racing pedigree. A boat was not just a way to cross water anymore. It was a status symbol, measured by how fast you could leave the others behind. Production numbers soared. Companies like Catalina and Pearson flooded marinas with bright white hulls, all promising the thrill of the racecourse. A new class of boat emerged: the Ocean Greyhound. They were long, lean, and sharp. Owners bragged about pointing high into the wind and surfing down waves at speeds in the double digits. Regattas became the proving ground, and the dock talk was all about who could shave seconds off a course. The message was clear: if you were not fast, you were obsolete. The language of the water changed. Displacement became a dirty word. Heavy boats were dismissed as relics, good only for the museum or the stubborn old-timers who refused to keep up. The magazines ran side-by-side comparisons, and the numbers told the story: lighter meant faster, and faster meant safer, or so the experts claimed. The logic was simple. If you could outrun a storm, you never had to face it. Speed, they said, was the ultimate insurance policy. Boat shows buzzed with excitement. Shiny hulls lined up under fluorescent lights, each one sleeker than the last. Brochures promised lightning acceleration and race-proven technology. Test sails were about the thrill, the slap of the hull as it planed, the spray over the bow, the feeling of wind and water blurring together at the limit. The future was bright, and it was moving fast. But not everyone was convinced. In the shadows of all that marketing glitter, a different kind of boat quietly rolled off the line. It did not race, it did not shine, it did not even try to keep up. And as the industry cheered its new champions, a few old hands just shook their heads and waited. Because out there, beyond the breakwater, the ocean was not reading the magazines. The Westsail 32 didn't just challenge the fashion of the era, it became the punchline. Around the docks, the nickname West Snail stuck like wet paint. In the pages of glossy sailing magazines, the verdict was swift and merciless. One review called it a floating brick. Another dismissed it as a tub for the timid. The press, hungry for the next racing darling, lined up to take their shots. A columnist quipped, "If you want to win a regatta, leave the Westsail at anchor." Letters to the editor piled on. She is a hobby horse, not a sailboat. The real crime in their eyes was weight: 20,000 pounds of stubborn fiberglass and lead. The Westsail wasn't just slow, they said, it was a hazard. One magazine warned, "A boat that can't outrun a storm is a boat that shouldn't go offshore." The logic was everywhere. Speed kept you safe. Speed let you choose your weather. Speed made you modern. Anything else was nostalgia, or worse, ignorance. The courtroom of public opinion handed down its sentence. Boat shows tucked the Westsail into the back row, behind the gleaming fin-keel racers and the new generation of plastic flyers. Testers measured acceleration with a stopwatch and shook their heads. "The Westsail drags the ocean with it," one wrote. The salesmen did not bother to hide their smirks. You want a tank? Join the army. Owners felt the sting. On the water, they watched the white hulls vanish over the horizon, spinnakers snapping in the wind. At the marina, they heard the snickers. "Still out there? Must have left yesterday." The Westsail became a symbol of everything the industry was leaving behind: mass, comfort, caution. The magazines ran cover stories on performance cruises and on the new era of offshore safety. In the fine print, the message was clear: if you sailed heavy, you sailed scared. But not everyone bought the story. Some sailors, the ones with salt in their beards and scars on their hands, looked past the numbers. They remembered the old rescue boats that brought men home from the North Sea. They knew that sometimes the ocean did not care how fast you could run. Still, the chorus of ridicule was loud, and the Westsail, ugly, heavy, unrepentant, wore its nickname like a scar. The industry moved on, convinced that the slowest boat afloat was already obsolete. Long before the Westsail 32 was written off as a relic, its shape was already old news. The double-ended hull, the heavy displacement, the thick rounded stern. None of this was born in a California boardroom or in a 1970s marketing brainstorm. It came from the North Sea, where the water is black, the wind is sharp, and a mistake gets you killed. Colin Archer, a Norwegian shipwright in the late 1800s, built rescue boats for pilots and fishermen who had to go out when everyone else ran for shelter. Archer's boats were slow, but they were stubborn. They came back when the weather turned mean. William Atkin, an American designer, took Archer's formula and translated it for blue water dreamers in the 1920s and 30s. His double-enders, boats like the Eric and the Thistle, were never meant to win races. They were built to carry weight, to stay upright when the sea tried to roll them, to keep water out and hope in. The Westsail 32 is a direct descendant. When William Crelock updated Atkin's lines for the Westsail project, he did not chase fashion. He chased survival. He gave the hull a long, full keel that runs nearly the length of the boat, anchoring 7,000 pounds of lead deep in the bilge. The stern curves up and in, a canoe shape designed to split following seas instead of catching them broadside. The rudder tucks in behind the keel, shielded from debris and grounding, the opposite of the exposed, vulnerable spade rudders on the new racers. Everything about the Westsail's shape is an answer to a question the ocean never stops asking. Can you take a hit and keep going? The hull is thick enough to shrug off the kind of pounding that would split a lighter shell. The deck and bulkheads are tabbed in with layers of glass and resin, so the boat flexes as a single, stubborn unit. The ballast sits low, giving the boat a slow, predictable roll, less likely to be knocked flat by a rogue wave. The cockpit is small, with high coamings and big drains, so green water rolls off instead of filling up. Even the handholds and interior joinery are heavy teak, meant for bracing yourself in a blow, not for impressing guests at anchor. This was not the logic of the racecourse, it was the logic of the life-saving craft. In a world suddenly obsessed with speed, the Westsail was a throwback, a machine built for the apocalypse, not the regatta. Its DNA was written by men who measured success in survivors, not trophies. That is why, when the critics scoffed at the weight and the old-fashioned lines, the designers just shrugged. They knew exactly what they had built. Out past the breakwater, the ocean would have the final say. A Westsail 32 does not flinch when the sea gets mean. The hull is all muscle, solid fiberglass laid up by hand, layer after layer, until it is nearly an inch thick at the turn of the bilge. No balsa core to rot, no foam to crush, just pure heavy laminate from stem to stern. The sound it makes when you wrap your knuckles on it is not a hollow ring, but a deep, stubborn thud. That is not decoration. That is survival in physical form. The ballast sits deep, 7,000 pounds of lead poured right into the keel cavity and sealed in resin. It is not bolted on like a racing fin, waiting for a single hard knock to shear it away. It is part of the hull, low, permanent, and impossible to shake loose. That weight is not just for show. It is what keeps the boat upright when the wind claws at the rig and the waves try to roll her over. When a Westsail gets knocked down, the ballast acts like a pendulum, swinging her back up, slow and relentless. Not quick, not flashy, just inevitable. The keel itself is a full-length slab of fiberglass, running almost the entire bottom of the boat. It tracks straight, resisting the sea's urge to twist the hull sideways. Where a fin keel racer might dart and weave, the Westsail shoulders through, refusing to get caught beam on by a breaking wave. The rudder, tucked safely behind the keel, is shielded from debris and impact. There is no exposed blade hanging in the current, waiting for the next floating log or stray line. It is all protected, all part of the same armored undercarriage. The stern curves up into a double-ended canoe shape, narrow and buoyant. When a following sea charges in, that stern splits the water, lifting the boat rather than letting tons of green water crash down on a flat transom. There is no sudden wall to catch the wave, no broad surface to invite a broach. Instead, the stern acts like a wedge, letting the energy roll off to either side. It is a design borrowed from rescue boats that had to come back through the worst the North Sea could throw. Up top, the cockpit is deliberately small. That means less space for water to fill if a wave breaks aboard, and big drains to get it out fast. The coamings are high, the scuppers oversized. The deck is stiff, built on half-inch plywood sheathed in glass, with bulkheads tabbed in heavy cloth. Every piece is overbuilt, every joint meant to take a pounding and stay together. Even the chain plates, those critical anchors for the rig, are bolted directly to the outside of the hull, spreading the load across thick glass, not just through a deck fitting. There is nothing fancy here, just hardware that refuses to fail. All this mass and geometry adds up to something the numbers cannot quite capture. The Westsail does not snap or shudder when it meets a wave, it thuds. It absorbs the hit and keeps moving. When the ocean tries to twist, roll, or swamp her, the boat answers with the same logic it was built on. Keep the center of gravity low. Keep the hull thick. Never give the sea an easy target. That is the real secret. When the storm comes, the Westsail does not need to run. It just needs to endure. October 1991. Somewhere off the New England coast, 3 people huddle inside a Westsail 32 as the world outside turns to chaos. The barometer is plunging, the wind howls at 80 knots, shrieking through the rigging with a pitch that drowns out every human sound. Water blasts sideways across the deck, each gust strong enough to flatten a grown man. The waves are not just tall, they are alive, 40 feet from trough to crest, breaking and rolling walls that block out the sky. The boat climbs each one slowly, shuddering at the top, then drops into blackness with a sickening thud. The storm is not a single force, it is a collision. A dying hurricane from the south meets a cold nor'easter from the north, feeding off each other, building a system meteorologists will call the perfect storm. Out here, it is just survival. The Satori is lashed to bare poles, sails down, engine drowned by spray. Inside, the crew fights exhaustion. Every muscle aches. Sleep is a memory. The cabin stinks of sweat and fear. Pumps run constantly to keep the bilge from rising. When a wave slams the hull, the sound is a cannon shot. The Westsail shoulders each blow, but the people inside are running out of margin. The radio crackles with Coast Guard voices, distorted by static and wind. The decision to call for help does not come easy. For hours, the crew debates, trust the boat or trust the rescue. But the sea keeps rising, and the wind keeps screaming. In the end, it is not the hull that gives out. It is the humans. They send the mayday. They wait for the helicopter, knowing that the next hour will decide everything. The Coast Guard arrives in the teeth of the storm, their cutter wallowing in the troughs as green water smashes over the bow. The plan is textbook. Launch the rigid hull inflatable boat, call sign TAM-1, and close the distance to Satori. But there is nothing routine about these seas. As TAM-1 approaches, a rogue wave picks Satori up and slams her down onto the RHIB's bow, crushing the inflatable's forward tube. The rescue boat is half deflated, barely afloat, and now as vulnerable as the people it came to save. Still, the Coast Guard crew fights their way to Satori, shoving survival suits across the gap before retreating, battered and leaking, back into the storm. Above, the HH-60 helicopter hovers, its rotors clawing at the gale. A rescue swimmer drops into the black water, lines whipping, basket swinging. One by one, the crew is pulled from the deck, first the last, then the rest, each lifted into the screaming wind. The skipper is ordered to abandon his boat. The hoist is slow, deliberate, every second stretched by the weight of the storm. When the helicopter finally turns for shore, the only thing left floating in that chaos is Satori herself. The ocean goes quiet for a moment. There is no heroism left in the air, only the sound of wind and the stubborn thud of a hull that refuses to yield. The people are gone. The boat is alone. Today, most new boats chase speed and style, but the ocean still rewards what endures. The survival of the Westsail 32 was not luck, it was design. In a world where planned obsolescence is standard, true seaworthiness remains rare. The critics called it West Snail. Ugly can outlast beautiful when it matters most. Some insults do not age well. Thanks for watching. Share your own sea stories below.